Well, welcome to the Why Not You podcast. Today we have Adrian Koehler on the phone with us today. And wow, we're in for a treat today. Adrian is a very unique individual. He's a leadership coach. He's also the host of two different podcasts, Raising the Bar, and the other one that's kind of interesting is the Naked Leadership podcast. So welcome to the podcast with us today, Adrian, and thank you
Oh,
for taking time out of your busy schedule.
of course, Glade. It's such an honor to be here. And thank you for having this podcast. The world needs more folks that are willing to stand up and say something. And I love the topic. I love the mission of this podcast, which seems like from our conversations, it's about helping people desire to have the courage to stand up and make a difference with other people. And why not? Why not you? I love it.
Well, that is exactly right. None of us come out of the womb as a speaker or motivational or a coach or whatever, a doctor. These are skills that are learned. And the nice thing is, it is a skill and it's something that can be learned. And that's what we like to talk about today.
It's amazing. Amazing.
Well, before we get going too much, what I like to do is I like to take a 30,000-foot view of where you grew up and what it was like for you at the Keller household.
Well, I'm calling into this from usually sunny Southern California. It happens to be raining today, one of the few times a year it's raining. But I grew up far from here and far from this environment. So now I'm in a town. I'm in a city of 11 million people. I grew up in a town of 7,000. My hometown, Salem, Illinois, in the middle of nowhere. Cornfields all around, soybeans. We're a rural background, and that's what it was like. My parents are amazing human beings. Jim and Angie Koehler, both public school teachers for 30 some years. My dad taught for 30 years at the high school he went to. So, and I joke that he's the George Bailey of my hometown. Which some people might get that reference. It's a Wonderful Life. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But my parents are just both salt of the earth individuals. I've been investing in people, investing in generations for a long time. So I got to see leadership up close. To your point, I don't think anybody comes out of the womb as a leader. We're all called to leadership, at least leading our own lives. But for those that decide or need to or want to lead other people, that's something that's learned over time. And some of us, like myself, were hit by the blessing of getting it modeled. So my parents modeled civic leadership and home leadership and spiritual leadership. And anyway, it was really great. I'm one of two sons. I'm the youngest of two boys. And great. So I joke that I grew up in an episode of Friday Night Lights. So big sports town, big sports family. You know, a lot of familiarity, but not much diversity. Not much diversity in thought necessarily, not much diversity ethnically either. So I was itching to get out as quickly as I could. I went on to school and played football in college, a place called Millikan University, which is up in central Illinois, and then moved to Chicago after that. But wanted to get around new ideas and different types of people just because for me, variety in life was always very exciting. So anyway, wonderful upbringing, and I have no complaints about it.
So was there something in I mean, you're a leadership coach, right? And was
Right.
there something in your sports or you mentioned your parents, but was there something that kind of led you into the coaching field? Was there
Well,
an individual or a coach or your parents, or what was it that kind of led you into that?
I mean, what led me into the leadership maybe mindset was uncomfortability, I think. I mean, whenever I got to be a teenager, I realized that life needed leaders and moments needed leaders. I saw that obviously in every locker room I was in, but also in every classroom or every like hang out at the cafeteria table. Whenever you know, uh, when you're sitting around and what are we doing on Friday night? That's a moment that needs leadership. And I realized there's two different paths. Either you let life happen and then you get the roll of the dice if it works in your favor or not, or you can make life happen and you can be the one that steps up and makes decisions and provides at least options or direction. And I probably for my own uncomfortability and my own, I don't know, teenage angst, I just realized who picks the captains in life? I mean, everybody stands up and volunteers to be the captain in life. So I just chose leadership just because it was more comfortable for me, although leadership is uncomfortable in other ways, but the payoff is so much better in my experience. So I was around some really great coaches, was around a lot of bad coaches too, and so I learned a lot from
You
coaches
don't
that were
really
just,
appreciate. you don't really appreciate the good ones until you've had some bad ones, right?
That's right. Just guys that were so tone deaf, guys that were just so driven that they just didn't care about, and then guys that were like so people oriented that they didn't call anybody into a mission. I mean, I saw them both. I'm thinking about two high school football coaches right now. One that was hard nosed and didn't care about anybody, it seemed like. One that was like wanted to be everybody's buddy, but nobody respected him. And so, they got to see that. And then throughout college, obviously got to up the next level of sports coaches and, they're the next level types of coaches, and I got to see different aspects of what worked in leadership and what didn't work in leadership. And even, in college, I was really involved in a lot of student organizations from an early age, and realized if you raise your hand and give a little bit of effort, you're already in front of the pack. So got a lot of opportunities to lead without ever knowing what I was doing, really, but except for just following my instincts. And then ended up, I was in Chicago working out of undergrad. I was an intensive care nurse. I was like one of these pre-med kids that decided I don't want to go be a doctor. Who am I joking me? Trying to satisfy my grandmother's desire for me. But then I ended up becoming a nurse and worked in the pediatric intensive care unit. And man, if there's ever a spot where in the most intense chaos or the most intense tragedy, leadership is needed and wanted. And that's both from a directional perspective and what are we going to do, and like what action is needed, but then from a heart perspective and a soul perspective, because people are having the worst days of their life. And so can you connect to another human being and help them find their feet whenever the world is crazy? And so got a lot of opportunities to go be with families in the midst of crisis and provide direction and provide love and provide support and grounding. And also make sure, as a nurse, at least in this setting, it was a children's hospital, like what they call a teaching hospital, where you're connected to a medical school. And so you're working with doctors, and most of them are about your age. And so they need direction. So leading up into that organization was helping a doctor know what to do and what not to do, and being willing to lead up and give direction and call a doctor from the hallway and say, "Hey, man, you botched it in there, man. You better go back in there. You need to tell them this and this and this, and get your stuff straight. Otherwise, I'm going to your boss. Get your head on straight. You're just ruining somebody's day in here." And they didn't know that necessarily because they're just scared and young as well and trying to figure it out. But those types of settings really were great for me. And then I found I come from a faith background. I was born that way, and then it became true for me later in life whenever I wanted it to be true for me. But I found a spiritual leader, his name was Erwin, who spoke about my faith. I come from a Christian background, spoke about my faith in a way that he really had the music, I would say. Like he spoke about it, and I thought, oh, wow, this guy. Now, he seems to be reading the same book as everybody else, but he talks about it in a very different way. And I want to be around this guy. So when I was in my early 20s, I heard one of his talks that he gave at a conference, and it was perfect for me. The talk was called "The Barbarian Way Out of Civilization." So as a young 20 kind of crazy dude, I thought this is
Seems
my
kind of
guy.
heavy.
It was heavy. It was heavy. It was just about the idea that Jesus wasn't a religious dude. He was a revolutionary. And I'm not here preaching anything, but this is like the idea was like he broke the rules. That's why they killed him. Is he broke the rules. And maybe love breaks religious rules. And so maybe it's not about establishing a religion, but actually establishing a whole wave of love and acceptance. And anyway, we can get all into that. But I just thought this guy, wow, what he did really was he put together faith and risk. And I had never heard anybody talk about that before. That if you live a life of faith, you're actually called to risk for the sake of other people. And so that was compelling to me. So I moved out to Los Angeles. That's how I got out to LA 17 years ago, was to come get to know this guy. I read all his books, I worked at the church for many years. I was a pastor in the middle of all this, and mobilized volunteers into the city, across the world, to go make a difference in charitable type ways. And I loved it. So seeing him and seeing how he led was really compelling to me. And I learned a lot from him, to answer your question.
Well, that's a great answer, and it gives us a really good insight to your background and where you came from, and how you were led into that that
Mm-hmm.
calling of being a coach and what have you.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
so how did you get into the corporate side of things, into the leadership, mentorship, coaching type of thing? Because I was I came from I'm going to one up you a little bit here,
Do it.
Adrian. I came from a city, we were farmers. There were 400 in my little village, my little town. There were 34
Awesome.
kids in my graduating class.
I
So,
love it.
you know, when you talk about the myopic type of views and
Sure.
whatnot, man, I've been there, done that. I understand that
Yes.
a lot. But anyway, I went to college to be a coach. I got that was my passion, was to be a coach.
Hmm.
People told me, "Hey, if you if you do what you love to do, you'll never
Hmm.
work a day in your life."
Right on.
So I love sports, and so I went to school to be a coach, but
Yeah.
I
That's
learned I
great.
couldn't make any money at it. I but I have
That's yeah.
since gone on to be a yeah, so I've got since gone on to be a coach of individuals and people and built teams and
Yeah.
whatnot across the globe, really.
Right.
But my what I was getting to is, how did you get in? I mean, through business, I got into coaching.
Right.
How did you get into the leadership coaching side of things on a corporate scale?
Yeah. Well, so I was out here in LA and I was building leadership teams, and and at Mosaic, that was the name of that church. So,
At the church? Okay,
at the
got it.
church called Mosaic, and we were really connected into self development. I think one of the we weren't into like indoctrinating people into believing X Y Z about the Bible or whatever. We were much more convicted that if people got to know themselves, they would get to know God. That's kind of our thing. Is like
Yep.
anyway. So we were entrenched with Gallup when Gallup came out with the Strengths Finder. One of the guys that helped develop the Strengths Finder was an elder at our church. So anyway, we were actually the pilot group that ran the Strengths Finder because we were a really diverse church. So, and we talked about leadership all the time. We put on conferences all the time, leadership conferences. And then this guy, Irwin, I was talking about, people around the world wanted him to go speak for them. But he didn't want to go all the time. So they'd send punks like me to go speak on his behalf. So I got lots of opportunities to think about leadership and learn a bunch of different pedagogies on how to talk about leadership and really entrepreneurial leadership. In our world specifically, it was about how do you start a church? Like that's very entrepreneurial and a lot harder than starting a business in many ways. So how do you rally a group of people to a cause and how to be enough about them that they feel connected, and then all very much about the world around them. So that whole dynamic I was really soaked in for several years. And then through that, I helped a guy in his own faith journey. His father was a billionaire, started a very successful, extremely well known in the US, I guess globally, a private equity firm. And so this guy who was younger, he was born a millionaire. And so after he had done all of his own spiritual transformation, he thought, I should give some of this money away. That's a pretty good idea. If you have like $100 million and you didn't earn it, maybe you ought to give some stuff away. So he didn't know what to do. And I happened to know him. And I was just the guy that happened to meet him and happened to be a friend to him and a mentor to him. And because I was very connected in the nonprofit world, he said, hey, would you help me figure out where to send the money? And I said, yes, yes, yes. But that's like step 5. First off, let's talk about money. Second off, let's talk about legacy. Let's talk about your vision. What do you want to do? And of course, maybe not, of course, but he didn't know. He hadn't traveled much. He hadn't seen much, hadn't been involved in much. So I left Mosaic to go start this foundation for him, and then took him around the world and explored lots of different needs in society, whether it's, I can make a long list of all the things we went to go see globally, but what moved him was helping people that had blown it in life get a second chance. And so we ended up working in the prison system. So long story short, through that, I met a guy who had a management consulting firm for 2 decades, but he'd been doing this transformational leadership coming out of the human potential movement in California. He'd been doing that for 40 years. So elder statesman, if you will, in this work and an expert at it. So I hired him to come in. And so we started running leadership programs in prison with murderers. So we would work with lifers, and we would do these 3-day events called Ready for Life and help them do the crux of the matter, which is moving from a victim mindset into a responsible mindset. Like if they could move out of I'm here because fill in the blank story, color of my skin, background, gang, no dad, blah, 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 all those reasons that they had to justify their behavior, and just said, no, I made choices that got me here, and I need to own those choices. And if you could do that, then they're free, even though they were behind bars at the time. Then they're free. And then they could actually mentor other kids instead of living in their victim story. And I'm giving the 10-second version of that. It's very complex and very heartfelt, but
I
that's
can
the
only imagine. I can only
yeah.
imagine.
So my first coaching client were murderers. So now I work with founders and CEOs. That's a piece of cake compared to these dudes. So I did that for a while and I loved it. I loved the work. Through that, I got involved even more in some nonprofits and helping mentor nonprofit leaders because we're writing big checks to them. And I wanted to be responsible and really support them and challenge them and help them, make good decisions. And I was on lots of boards like that. So I'm moving now down the road. And then I got out, and through that process, I'd gone through this coaches academy, which just to kind of make me better at the job I was doing. And I'd gone through all this leadership training. I'm a nerd for all that stuff. So read all the books and do all the stuff. I'm a sucker for anything self-development, as you can imagine. And then I got out and say, well, what do I want to do now? I could go
Guilty as
back and do,
charged.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, same here.
And I wish I read all the books I've bought, but that's a whole nother topic. The I had options, right? I could go back in the medical world because I loved that and I was really good at that. I could go work in the ministry world because I loved that and I was good at that, or the philanthropic world. But all those things, there was something missing in there for me. I liked the context of coaching, which is really looking, from me and my style, is really looking somebody in the eyes and can we have the most honest conversation they've ever had? That's always what I'm looking for. Can we have the most honest conversation? Because the truth is what sets us free. So if I can help them get really crystal clear about where they're going, what their vision is, and get really crystal clear and with a sober view of what's happening right now, which is usually less romantic than we want it to be, and we got to get more honest about it. I just love that. And I've always been kind of an intense guy. And if you're in a coach, it's okay to be intense because people are paying you hopefully good money to go be what I call fierce advocate for them. So I just started coaching people. And I didn't talk about my background really at all because most people like you, Glade, come out of the business world. So they've got some credibility and some chops in the back end. I didn't. I was this weird guy that knew a lot about people and had traveled and done a whole bunch of intense work, but I didn't have any kind of resume that a typical coach has. But I had a lot of experience that the typical coach doesn't have. So it took me a while to integrate all that. I realized for me, being with people in the most crucial conversations of their lives, I love that. That's not like run away from me. I run into that fire every day. I love it. Any of the complexity and the chaos, I'm just good under fire for whatever reason. So I started coaching people like me at the time. I was 28 at the time. So I was coaching more middle management types and friends of mine. I had a lot of credibility and a big network because I was a pastor guy. And then slowly over time, to get to your question, how do I get into corporate work? You just say yes to a bunch of stuff. I had a friend of mine that worked at a big international architecture firm, and she said, "Hey, we're doing a lunch and learn thing. Would you come in and talk about the Strengths Finder, which I used to use at the time? I don't use that anymore. I use a different tool now." But I said, "Of course, I'll come in. You know what? I'll do it for free as long as the senior vice president's in the room and I can meet with her afterwards. If you give me those two things, I'll come and do it." And so she said, "Sure, that sounds like a good price." So I came in, did my song and dance. People loved it. And then I met with Katie, her name, Katie Sprague at RTKL. And I started asking questions that she wasn't asking. And I started offering solutions that she wasn't considering. And all of a sudden there's value there. And that was my first corporate client. Within 2 months, I had 14 vice presidents of that company that I was coaching, and we did leadership trainings, 3 or 4 of them that year, and traveled the world for RTKL, and that's what kicked it off. And then I've had a very network driven growth model. It's all relationship driven. I didn't even have a website for 7 years. It was all just word of mouth. And so, and if just like anything, people talk about what works and they talk about what's exciting to them. And so I got into Nike for a long time, and that developed into other big brands. And it's just this network effect. So that's how I got into it. I've never had a corporate job. I won't ever have a corporate job. I'll get fired immediately. And that's cool. But I end up working with entrepreneurs because they're my type of folks. They're driven, they're troubled, they're excited, they're, unrelenting, they're restless, they are desperate for solutions. They are really usually pretty defensive. And if you can get behind that armor and talk to them in a way that works for them, and most of the time, if you're willing to put it all on the line for them, you have their respect. So I have a pretty blunt style when it comes to coaching, not tell people what to do, but just I'm going to be really honest with you, and you don't have to like that, and we don't have to work together. That's okay. But I'm going to be all myself, all here. And if you like that style, that's great. And most of them are, people We say it now like it's a life sentence. We say it's lonely at the top. And I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I join people at the peak and have real serious conversations with them, the ones that they're dying to have, but don't have a lot of people close to them that they can have it with them. So that's how I got into it. That's how I stay in it. And so then I built a big leadership coaching firm and training firm, and we've got 9 people on staff now that do work with all different types of organizations.
Well, that's an amazing journey, really fascinating, and we could go in about 500 different directions on
Right
that.
on.
But what I'd like
Sorry,
to
that's
do,
the short version.
no,
I'm
no, no,
sorry. I know it's
no,
long-winded. My wife
that's
tells me I'm
awesome.
a bit long-winded. So,
Yeah, well, that's okay. That's all right. That's great. You have the gift of communication, and you really are pulling people in. And I hope people are our listeners are gaining the I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're feeling it. And so, what I'd like to do, Adrian, right now is get a little bit more personal, not personal on
mhm,
your perspective, but for our listeners.
sure.
How do they self lead themselves? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It has been for me. It's like, who do you listen to?
hmm
How do you listen? How do you learn to listen to yourself,
hmm
trust yourself, love yourself
Yeah.
because of all the challenges? Man, there's
Yeah.
so much noise out there. There's
Yeah.
so many people that went to a seminar and come up with a certificate and are making it really good at making noise, and they have no substance.
Amen. Amen.
It's
Um,
true.
it is true. It is true. I'm just kind of sinking into your question. It's a big question. And I'm thinking about it. I mean, we're recording this on a Tuesday morning, and there's already been about 15 moments of self-leadership that were needed from me, just taking on the chaos of my morning. And yeah, so the question is like, if somebody wants to, which is first off a big question, but if somebody wants to lead themselves, how do we do
I
that?
think that's the key question. I
Yeah,
think that's the key answer, really, is do you really want it?
right. So
But
let's see.
sorry for an
Let's see.
interruption.
No, it's great, man. I'm with you on that. I think you and I, play the same music a lot. So um, I'm only pausing just because I want to hopefully answer this question well. But let's start with that. First off, I tend to think about the other side first. Like, what are the options if I don't want to be in this self-leadership conversation with myself? And that's a big part of our work. I mean, we focus on generating new results with clients. We focus on creating the right teams and the right team culture. And then we focus on what we call self-mastery or self-leadership. And to be honest, we spend 50 to 70% of the time on self-mastery. Why is that? Because everything else is out there. There's a lot that's outside of our control, but what's going on between my ears, I have control over. Now, I don't mean that I narrate and I generate every feeling. I don't mean that, because for me, feelings are like the wind. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if how long it's going to be here. I don't know how long it's going to stop, if it's going to help or not. So anyway, all those, even those thoughts, I don't narrate all those things. They just happen. Like thinking was occurring before Adrian showed up on the scene. Thinking has been around since the
Right.
beginning of
Right.
time. So I think the first thing is like, if I'm deciding to be the executive of my own life, to be my own boss, I first off have to realize that I'm managing this spacesuit, and I didn't take a vote on how my brain works. Because our brains are wired for survival. That's number one thing our brain is doing, is trying to make sure I live today and make it to tomorrow. And the second thing is that I'm saving energy so that if I need to survive later, I can. That's the number one and number two vote of the computer between my ears. And I don't get a vote on that. At least I'm going to say it like it's gravity. We can prove it neurologically. But anyway,
Yep.
so first off, I'm running this spacesuit, and it's not agreeing with me all the time, because I've got my own insecurities. I've got my own deficits. I've got, I'm not as smart as I want to be. I'm not as driven as I want to be. I'm not as happy as I want to be. I'm not a blah, blah, blah. There's like a lot of stuff happening. And so first off, I got to be willing to take the fact that um, not everything's under my control, but it is my responsibility if you want it to be. So I don't want to understate this. You don't have to take responsibility for your life, but then you don't get to complain later when it's not what you want. It's kind of like folks that like to complain about politics but don't vote. It's like, you don't have to vote, that's fine, but don't complain about the guy that's in office because you didn't participate. So that's like, if you don't want to lead yourself, just resign, then you're naturally kind of resigned. And then you'll find yourself complaining about things because you didn't participate. I mean, in all of our trainings, first day of a 2-day leadership training, I'm about an hour in, I'm going to write up on the board maximum value, and I'm going to ask the people why they came to the training, even if their boss told them to. Why did you come? Because you could have not come, you might have lost your job, but why did you come? Like, what do you come here for? What's valuable for you? If these 2 days were for you to get something done for you, what would that be? Which most of them have not asked themselves that question, because most of us just kind of wander through life and let a day happen and let a meeting happen. And so I'm asking them to get into an ownership seat and get clear on value. And then I say maximum value equals full participation. That we participate, like the whatever I get in life is 100% connected to how I participate in life. So if we want a great life, then we must call ourselves into self-leadership. We might get lucky and maybe we won the lottery and we got a great family and we got a great scenario and whatever, but that's just luck. And I don't count on luck at all. If I want to create a great life, I must generate one. So that's the first thing. And that's a crossroads for everybody. So essentially, at whatever complaints you have in your life, listeners, and this is me talking to myself as well, whatever complaints I have in my life, I've either created the scenario that has generated the complaint or I've allowed the scenario to happen. Now, think about that for a second, because you're not going to say that. When I say that, you're going to be like, no, it was Tom. Tom did it to me. Or no, it was the economy. The economy did it to me. Or it was my dad or my mom or the fact that blah, blah, blah. Whatever the reason is, that's fine. But you can either have reasons or have new results. That's a crossroads. So to think about any kind of complaint you have in your life, it's because you've not generated something new. So now, if people want to lead themselves, which I think is the most heroic act, because we don't need any more martyrs in the world. We don't need any more complainers in the world. Those don't help. We've been around people like that, and I can be like that too.
It really is the hero's journey.
Right
is
on.
to take control of your own life.
Right on.
And be intentional about what you do. Control the controllables, I call it.
That's right.
You control the controllables. What can I control? About the only thing I can control is my mind. That's 6 inches between my ears.
That's
what
right.
I read, what I listen to, and what I watch.
That's
what
right.
I feed my brain. Control
That's
the
right.
controllables.
That's right. And I mean, with that, I mean, I think there's a context around that. So what you read and what you listen to and all that, that's great. And that's content. And those solve for problems. If I've got a problem, I need to go solve what that is. I can go listen to that. Or you might just know that you want to grow. And so what do? I need to go experiment and go maybe discover something new, like something I didn't know, I didn't even know. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm working out at the gym, and I'm listening to crazy stuff, like stuff that, I don't even know necessarily what's on there, but I might discover something new and that's interesting. And then I can think about that and I can talk about that and it starts to ingrain into my own worldview. But there's something even beyond that, or I would say in the context around that, which is, there's like 3 pillars of our work. One is people react to the world according to the way the world occurs to them. We all react to the world according to the way the world occurs to us, i.e. perception is reality. So like what I'm seeing and the conversation I'm in about what I'm seeing actually generates how I respond to that. That's what I'm saying. And I think that's 100% true. Like nobody gets to escape that, right? So you and I had lots of anticipation of this call. That's why I show up and I'm energetic and I want to make a difference. And that's my perception. And it's not like an accident. That's my commitment. And so based on my commitment, now I show up with energy, want to get to know you, want to get to know the listeners, how I can make the biggest difference. That's a perception issue first. And my actions, all my thoughts and my decisions and my actions, and at the end of the day, my results come out of how I'm seeing the world. People would call that a blueprint or a belief system or whatever, but we got to get connected to the belief system that all of our thoughts and our actions hang out in. So there's an aspect, if I want to lead myself, I better get connected to how I'm seeing the world. because that's really everything. That's the starting point of everything, is what I'm saying. So let me try to be poignant. If I want to lead myself, first off, I better get to know myself. And that's a pretty scary endeavor, I think, for all of us. Meaning, at least I know for me, I'm just thinking about some of Adler called them life sentences, where there's some fear we have about ourselves that we might spend our lives trying to make sure it's not true. Let me give an example. Like, I've got a couple life sentences that come up for me. One is, I'm dumb. I'm not smart. I'm not smart enough. Now, I could tell you when that belief system started to happen. But if I don't watch it, I walk into a room, I'm talking with a brand new client, I'm sure that I'm not smart enough to hang with this person in my own head. And I'm not even turning that conversation on. It's just there. It's people would call it imposter syndrome or something these days, which has become very chic. But there's a thing like, I'm not smart enough, and I coach world-class minds. Like, these people, they're at least 3 or 4 or 5 exponentially smarter than me on paper. Trust me, they are. And I know that to be true. But my insecurity about it, that's something going on in the background. Or there's another one. So first, I guess if I don't watch it, I end up talking a lot to compensate for my fear that I'm not smart enough. That's how this shows up in my world. Sometimes if I'm insecure, I'll talk to try to prove to myself and prove to them that I'm actually smart. And they're not questioning if they're talking to me, they already think I'm smart. I'm in that conversation about myself. They're not, because their buddy Tom told them about me. It just happened this morning. Somebody reached out and said, "Hey, my friend said I should talk to you. Can we talk today?" Like, people are they're in a very different conversation about me than I am. These are like life sentences. Or another one of mine is that I'm too intense, like, which starts when I was a kid, way long ago. Like, Adrian, you're too philosophical, you're too psychological, you're too serious. So if I don't watch it, I get really insecure about being the deep end guy. But that's just really me. I love talking about important stuff. To me, for other people, it's way too intense. So all that to say is, like, you need to get connected. We all need to get connected to our own machinery, our own limited beliefs, because if we don't watch it, those end up running our lives, because we're all insecure and we all are acquainted with the fact that we might not have enough to meet the needs of the world. And I think that's just universal. So some of us will go and hide because of those, or we can take those on, and we call it hugging the cactus. So whatever the thing is that I'm insecure about, I should befriend that thing instead of run from it. So I think about this in a way that, well, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm too intense for this person, and that's okay. I can integrate that. I can be unapologetic about that, and it's not even a shameful thing for me. I mean, I talk about it right now, and no big deal. I don't know, other people have insecurities about their own intellect, and I'm a pretty smart guy, but they might have that, and they just might hide from it, or just, it's my friend now. So if I want to lead myself, I better get connected to my own limited conversations and befriend them. Number 2, I would say, get connected to a future that's worth taking on your challenges. So, like, pick an aim for the future. Like, if I don't like what's happening in my world, I've probably been subject to the world around me instead of me being in control and me controlling the controllables, as you were saying. So what can I choose? What do I really want? Like, we talk about vision. Vision is a future worth having. So there's a picture of what I want, and it's worth having, i.e. I'm willing to sacrifice for it. And sacrifice is not like you're doing a Navy SEALs training. Most of the time it's ego sacrifice. Right. It's like, I'm willing to be a rookie and look dumb until I can actually learn something. I'm willing to ask for help. I always say I always need more help than I want. I'd rather not need help, but I need a bunch of help to pull something off, especially to pull it off at the scale I'm trying to pull it off as a person this day and age. So I'm going to need a lot of help. So I'm willing to sacrifice to win. So get clear about a vision. If you're going to lead yourself, you better get clear about what you want. And then the third point I would just say is get clear about current reality. So there are things right now that are happening. That's a long list that's probably already well crafted. But what people don't do is say, what am I doing that's contributing to the problems that I have? What am I doing? Not for blame, but for contribution. Like, how am I creating the things that I say I don't want? Now, there's an answer to that. Most people say, oh, I'm not doing anything, because that's our natural thing, because we want to live in defense. But if I'm really willing to own the fact that I'm contributing to my own sorrow, I'm contributing to my own frustration, I'm contributing to my own despair. And what am I doing that does that? And you have to divorce yourself from all the justifications, because everybody's got stories to justify why they're doing that. But if I rid myself of the safety of my excuses, and I just stand there as a person that's authentic and inauthentic at the same time. I'm both heroic and I'm a wussy at the same time. I'm like courageous and I'm cowardice. At least that's the way I think about it. Is even as Freud or Adler would say as well. It's like we're the and definitely Jung, like we are these mixed people, right? We have these heroic tendencies, and we just want to go run and hide, and that's okay. But if I can get clear about that, then all of a sudden I can own what's broken right now, and then I can come to the surface in a way that works. Because if I'm in LA and I'm trying to go to New York, but I actually think I'm in Tucson, I've got trouble. I don't know where I am. I don't know what's happening. I need to, if I'm going to get somewhere new, I better know where I'm starting from. So 3 big points. That's where I'd start. Some self-awareness, self-inquiry, clarity and conviction about the future, and a deep ownership of current reality.
Wow. I mean, we could go on for hours and hours. I
We
mean,
could, man.
it's
I
like
want to be your friend.
push play. And well, I want to be your friend. And excuse me, we have just, Adrian, there's so much in there. There's so much in your heart and in your brain and in your passion and in your energy. And, and, and we can't even, we can't even touch the surface. And so there's got to be something that you do or somewhere that you live, so to
Sure.
speak, to where people can glean some of this wisdom and information. Do you have workshops? Do you have books? Do you have? I know you have the 2 podcasts and whatnot. How do we get more of Adrian?
Well, thanks for asking. Because
For those that want it, for
sure,
those that want it.
yeah, I'm not for everybody. I'm a shot of whiskey. If you want a wine spritzer, go down the road. But if you like this type of thing, then great.
I love it.
If you're
Bring it on. Yeah.
that's my phrase, man. Bring it on. Let's go. And anybody I work with has
Now,
that kind of itch. I don't know. You were a
yeah.
coach. You love athletics. Me too. That's just, I don't know. Life is here, man. It's right here, right now. We don't know how many days we got. So anyway, I find myself jumping in my chair. The Thanks for asking that, because I'd love to connect with folks. If this connects with anybody, and you might even, it might happen on a spiritual level, and I don't want to get all weird. I mean, you just have like a hunch that, man, there's something here in the conversation, not necessarily about me, but something about the conversation that there's something I want to go explore. I'd love to connect to anybody. I'd love to connect to you, get you connected to the right person on my team potentially. We love serving people that are really after something and are really committed to living their legacy and make something count. So if that's you, I'd love to connect with you. Easy place to connect is online, like on Instagram, adrian.k on Instagram. We've got, let me offer a couple other things. So
And Adrian, I'll put all this stuff in the show notes so
that's
that
great.
people can, yep. So it'll be a
That's
little bit
awesome.
easier, but
That's awesome. Well, we've got, if you want to come, if you know that you're looking to make a big shift and it's really scary and you don't necessarily know how, I've got the opportunity for you. It's called the Revenant process, Revenant about reinvention. Like this whole self-leadership conversation we have crafted and honed over the last few decades. That my business partner and I co-lead it. He's the one that I was talking about. Um, it's called the Revenant process, and there's one coming up in mid-April, the 20th through the 23rd of April. It's in Boise, Idaho. It's a 4-day deep dive personal leadership accelerant process. So it's not you sit and take.
wait a minute, Adrian. I live in Boise. Are you serious? It's
You're
coming to
coming.
Boise,
You're
Idaho.
coming. We're coming to
Oh
Boise,
my gosh,
Idaho.
I I'm there. I'm
Come
there.
on, come on, baby. Well, then come.
I
If you guys want, if you've been listening for a
you
long
come
time,
home.
if you've been listening to Glade for a long time and can't wait to give this guy a hug like me, then come on to the Revenant process, 20th through 23rd in Boise, Idaho. Um, I, I I won't go into all
I'll
the
be on
depths
the
of it.
front row if
Come
I
on,
can
baby.
get there.
Yes. So it is a 4-day experience. It's not you sit and take notes like a student, because that doesn't produce the type of experience we're looking for. We're looking for revelation. I'm looking for insights that change us forever. And that's what we're committed to. So it is experiential. And this is going to be a very unique one. I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of these. Trust me, this room, the quality of the experience we're committed to the same thing every time. The quality of the experience is really connected to who's in the room. And this room is phenomenal. So if you ever wanted to go to something like this, we're not Tony Robbins. We're not going to be jumping around in light shows and all that kind of stuff. And God bless Tony Robbins. He's done a great work. But this is a deep conversation. There's be plenty of excitement and plenty of sorrow all in the same room. We're going to talk through it all. And so people come in with their own vision and what leap they want to make in their own life, and you learn a ton. I loved it when I went through it a dozen years ago. So the link for that is wearerevenant.com. Wearerevenant.com. Check that out. It's a very low price point on purpose. We want the most amount of people to be able to come. We do cap the room at about 40. And we've got I think we've got 10 spots left for this one. So if you're interested at all, stop waiting and start get into it. And then the other thing I want to offer, because maybe you're a business leader, and we've been talking a lot about personal leadership here. If you have corporate leadership, then you ought to learn exactly how to negotiate effectively. We do negotiation training, and we've created a whole free online assessment for folks to understand their own, what we call negotiation style. There's 5 different styles. It's good to know where you go naturally, and then how to get some resources to up your game. If you want to check that out, that's negotiation.takenewground. That's my company, negotiation.takenewground.com. Check that out. We're going to do a negotiation training in LA in the summer. So those are a couple free, the negotiation quiz, and we've got the Naked Leadership podcast. Go listen to that. Those are free resources. If you want to come do a deep dive, come to the Revenant process.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Glade,
Adrian,
you're in Boise.
It's been a
You're
pleasure.
in Boise. I'm blown away. What a gift.
I am.
My business partner lives in Horseshoe Bend.
Are you kidding me?
Not kidding.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be up there in June as well. I'm taking my whole family up. We floated the Payette last time, and we're doing fly fishing, the whole shebang.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's, like I said, just keep having the chaos in California that's driving people this way. My real estate business is thriving because of that. I love it.
Yeah.
And my business, you've been able to participate on some of the outdoor lifestyle, the water raft, white water rafting and the fly fishing, and just the quality of life is amazing up here. So,
my business partner was from Sonoma County, north of San Francisco, his whole life. He just moved. They bought a big parcel of land up there, and they live there, and they're making their home all family compound, and all their kids are moving there, and they're building a lot of homes up there too. So anyway, it's a dream, that's for sure. It's beautiful.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been a joy. This has been a treat. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure I reach out to you and get all of these websites and assessments and all that kind of stuff clear so that I can put it in the show notes. So
sure thing.
If you want to do a treat, real treat for me.
Yes. Well, if you ever want to do a round 2 or round 3 or round whatever, I'm in. I'm just here to serve. So
let's do it.
Love to do it.
Okay. Same here. Love giving back.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.